Hey, Professor Talon. Happy Sunday. I hope you're doing well and staying healthy during these times. So, here's my personalized dashboard, and I borrowed the cluster analysis worksheet from our previous work because I found it to be the most insightful and informative, especially in regards to I really enjoyed how it gives us this great feedback on ordering the states from the best to the worst, and we're able. And you addressed here that these these bottom states are particularly problematic. So I wanted to make my dashboard, or I wanted to give my dashboard the ability to take a deeper look into specific states and to see why this seems to be the case, right? And these states even seem to be operating in a loss in a few places, right? They're below zero. So I created a map of every state and their expenses so we could take a look into which states were spending the most money. And I assumed that perhaps these states were spending too much money, and that is why they're not doing too well in profits. Yet, you could see here that California is actually spending the most and getting the most back. They have the most profits. And on the flip side of that, we can see that New Hampshire is actually the very least of all the states, 6,600, and we could see that that's the floor of all the expenses. So that was very surprising to me to see that New Hampshire was operating in so poorly, yet uh, spending very minimal amounts. I would assume that they were exceeding their expenses and perhaps spending too much, but I was wrong. So we could use these other worksheets to take a further look into this. I created a total expenses function to marketing, and as you can see, um, the trend is upwards. I didn't include any trend lines because it seems quite clear that as you spend more on marketing, your total expenses will rise because you're spending more money on marketing. But I specifically wanted this worksheet because we're able to filter out states and take a look into specific states as we choose. Now, the fourth worksheet I included is the sales to profit sheet. And with this sheet, we could do the same thing, focus on a specific state, but we could also look at each specific product type and which products are giving them a loss and the products that are doing the best and giving them the most profit. So we were talking about New Hampshire. So let's go ahead and take a look at New Hampshire and see if we could draw any conclusions from the data from just New Hampshire. Now, as we could see, the marketing and the least expenses, so they're spending the least amount of money into their tea, uh, sometimes not even marketing at all. So marketing very minimally, yet they are getting uh, pretty significant profit on their tea. Right? So they don't even need to market it. They don't spend too much money on tea at all. Yet they seem to profit. They profit pretty well from it. And on the flip side, we could take a look up here on what they're marketing the most and what their most expenses are, and it seems to be espresso. Meanwhile, they're spending the most on marketing espresso, yet they're still receiving a loss. Now, this is very interesting because no matter how much they sell, right? They sell 141 sales, they still don't profit. The profit's -1. And now it's just one dot, but for the most part here, we see that you're not profiting off espresso. Now, New Hampshire again is one of the worst states. So what we could conclude from this information is that perhaps if New Hampshire ramped up their marketing of tea, switched these around, marketed way more on their tea, spent the most amount of money on their tea instead of the least, perhaps they could increase their sales, right? Their sales aren't even that much. The most amount of sales is 63. but espresso, you could get 150 sales. So if you marketed your tea much more and pushed up those sales, you'd still be getting great profits. And you push up those sales, perhaps that would be able to make New Hampshire no longer operate so poorly and bring them higher in the cluster analysis. So, here's my conclusion of my dashboard. I really enjoy how you're able to take a specific look into each state and just zone everything else out and take a very specific route into addressing different data. So yeah, thanks so much for the great work, and Tableau is awesome.